As two young women lie dead, Dale Cregan calmly walks into a police station. "I've just done 2 coppers," he tells the officer on duty, and holds out his arms to be handcuffed. The officer jumps over the desk and calls for backup. Cregan was one of the most wanted men in Britain and had evaded capture until now. But he'd ended the chase in the cruelest of circumstances, taking the lives of PC's Fiona Bone and Nicola Hughes, women who were simply doing their jobs and found themselves in the path of a killer.
I was driving home from work and I had a call from a DCI who wanted to speak to me. He was waiting at my home, so I think the minute he says, "I'm from the police and I need to speak to you, I'm outside your house," that's when you start to realise there's something seriously wrong. It's like watching some film that you know what the end is, but you want to pause it, you want to rewind it and have a totally different ending, and then you've got that realisation, well, you can't change it, and you've got to somehow try and live with it and cope with it.
The night before, Dale Cregan had turned up here at the house of a man he vaguely knew in Greater Manchester. Inside, he brandished a gun and placed a military grenade on the fireplace, terrifying the family. The following morning, he made this call to lure the police officers to their deaths.
Police emergency.
Someone just threw a big concrete slab through my back window and ran off.
Of the house or a car? What are we talking?
No, sorry, in my back window in the house.
After making the false report, he asks when police will arrive.
They'll try and get up there as soon as, if there's a possibility, he's still knocking about.
All right then, thanks very much.
Okay.
I'll be waiting.
With that chilling warning, Dale Cregan was armed and ready. As the police officers approached the front door, he opened fire. They turned to run, but Nicola Hughes was shot repeatedly in the back. Fiona Bone tried to run for cover, hiding behind this porch. She drew her taser, but Cregan shot her several times. As he left, he threw a grenade here into the garden where their bodies were lying. 32 shots had been fired. He told detectives, "I've murdered 2 police officers. You were hounding my family, so I took it out on you." Later adding, "Sorry about those 2 that have been killed. I wish it was men."
To deliberately go, "Oh, I'm just going to kill a policeman today because I don't like them," it seems unreal. And it's a level of callousness and no empathy with anybody is beyond really my comprehension. Somebody had to go to that call because the police respond to it. That's why all police are really heroes.
Dale Cregan had begun his killing spree 4 months earlier. As part of a long-running feud between 2 families, he'd been enlisted to kill a rival. In a stolen car, Cregan and 2 associates pulled up outside a pub. A masked gunman ran inside. The target, Mark Short, was shot dead. Dale Cregan was arrested, then bailed, and went on the run. Next on his hit list, Mark's father, David Short. It was a case of unfinished business. He was repeatedly shot and a grenade was thrown. Minutes later, on a nearby street, Cregan threw another grenade. It was the first time military grenades had been used in Britain in this way. By then, a major manhunt was underway for a murderer with a violent reputation who used to boast how he lost his eye in a fight. But for weeks, he evaded capture, remaining free to kill the officers.
You can't underestimate how disappointed Greater Manchester Police must be, but bearing in mind they lost 2 of their own officers because they failed to find him. So I think there will be a lot of soul searching on their intelligence systems. You know, why didn't their informant system work? Why didn't their other intelligence systems work and find him? And why didn't their community relations and intelligence work for him to have been handed in by the local community?
There were fears more of the military grenades used in the murders remained in criminal hands, but these weapons, believed to be the rest of the batch used by Cregan, were discovered earlier this month, concealed beneath a drain in Oldham. Cregan and his associates are still considered so dangerous, millions of pounds have been spent on security at the trial. The Chief Constable of Greater Manchester Police insists everything was done to try to catch him sooner, including the offer of a £50,000 reward for information leading to his capture.
What we were faced with was a very determined conspiracy from a small number of people to protect Cregan. They moved him around the country, and despite our very best efforts, sadly, they were able to evade us despite a huge number of warrants that we executed, obviously all the time armed operations. Despite that, he was protected by these people, and sadly it then eventually led to the deaths of our 2 officers.
For the investigators, there will be unanswered questions. For the families, unending grief. And for Greater Manchester Police, the loss of 2 young lives marked the darkest day in the history of the force. Becky Johnson, Sky News, Manchester.
Criticism there from the family at the end about, I think I understood this right, some of the other sentences that there has been in relation to this whole very long and complex case, Becky.
Yes, and you heard in that statement from the family of David and Mark Short that no sentence will ever be long enough for the people who brutally murdered the father and son, and that is a feeling that is shared by the families of PC Nicola Hughes and PC Fiona Bone. This killing spree that Dale Cregan went on, these cold-blooded, brutal killings carried out with powerful guns and hand grenades, have had an impact on so many in Greater Manchester. Beyond the families of the victims, of course, the police force, Greater Manchester Police Force, a force who describe what happened as the darkest day in the history of the existence of the force, and certainly the police officers who had to subsequently carry out the investigation that led to this trial have had a particularly difficult task. In some cases, they were friends with PC Fiona Bone and PC Nicola Hughes. And I remember the day after these murders being at Greater Manchester Police headquarters, and there was very much a sense that the police officers wanted to come to work. They wanted to continue to enforce the law on the streets of Greater Manchester, and they were doing that in fear. In some cases, 2 of their colleagues had been brutally murdered, but they were doing it on behalf of those colleagues who loved their jobs and were doing their jobs when they were lured to their deaths by this brutal killer, who we now know will spend the rest of his life in jail for what he did.
They took all the loads up. Yeah.
For Gerald Woolliscroft, this was a dream retirement home by the sea. But nearly 3 months on from the flood here in Rhyl, there's still a lot of work to do.
It's just upsetting me seeing this lot again. Because I only stay about a couple of minutes in here and then I go. I just go.
This is what happened as the sea surged up their street. Gerald, his partner Kathleen and their cat had to be rescued after becoming trapped and terrified while water rose around them. For now, the couple are staying at a holiday caravan park. They've been told they could be here until the summer.
For days I couldn't stop crying, because everything that you'd got, everything you'd worked for and everything you'd got, it's just gone. It was just for nothing. It's all worthless in other people's eyes. Of course it is, it's just things, isn't it?
Most of the 130 homes that were flooded here belong to elderly and vulnerable people, reliant on insurers or donations. But the Prime Minister's pledge that money is no object when it comes to floods doesn't apply here. The funds are only for England, which has surprised and angered people in Wales.
If they're going to say, well, OK, here's an endless pot of money, for want of a better word, well, are they going to pass that round to the other countries in the UK that have been equally affected?
June and John Cantrell retired here from the Midlands. They say unless flood defences can be strengthened, they're not sure they want to stay.
It's more difficult at this time of life because when you're younger you can bounce back. So I'll have to go again for another week.
They too are now staying in a caravan. It's a far cry from the foreign holiday they'd saved up for this winter, but can now no longer afford.
It went from having a home, a car, lovely garden, from everything to nothing within 15 minutes.
Like all those affected, they have to start afresh.
and need all the help they can get. Becky Johnson, Sky News, Rhyl.